Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Bits episode. Today, it's one of those conversations that just naturally turns into a full-on geek-out session. Because we're talking about one of the coolest electric vehicles ever built, the Tesla. I'm joined by my good buddy Andreas, and if you're even remotely interested in electric trucks, logistics, or the future of transportation, this is one of those vehicles that's impossible to ignore. Now, to be fair, Tesla isn't alone. In this space anymore, there are plenty of electric trucks on the market, especially in Europe, where they're already becoming surprisingly common. We recently covered electric trucks from manufacturers like Scania and Volvo over on Out of Spec Reviews. Mercedes has some genuinely impressive offerings as well. The Mercedes e-tron, for example, looks fantastic and feels very production ready. There's also a growing wave of Chinese electric trucks that are already operating at scale. So yes, competition is very real. But still, there's just something different about the Tesla Semi. When Tesla does something, especially at this scale, it tends to feel like a glimpse of the future. Part of that is because of Tesla's vertical integration. They're not just assembling parts from different suppliers. They're deeply involved in the batteries, power electronics, software, charging infrastructure, and even the manufacturing processes. Of course, Tesla is one of the largest producers of electric vehicles in the world. Whether BYD has technically surpassed them in pure volume is up for debate. But either way, Tesla is right at the top. The context alone makes the Semi fascinating. What really kicked off this conversation was a tweet from Sawyer Merritt. If you're not familiar with Sawyer, he's one of the most reliable sources of Tesla-related information out there. He covers Tesla almost obsessively, and somehow always seems to know what's going on before anyone else. He tweeted that Tesla had updated its semi-truck website, revealing the final production trims ahead of customer deliveries, which are expected to begin in the coming months. That's a big deal, because up until now, the Tesla Semi has lived in a kind of limbo between prototype and production. So before diving into what's new on the website, it's worth stepping back and looking at the Tesla Semi program as a whole. Up to this point, Semis have been produced in very low volumes. These trucks were primarily used for internal testing, validation, and real-world data collection. Tesla needed to prove that the technology worked, not just on paper but day in and day out, hauling heavy loads over long distances. I've personally seen Tesla Semis driving up and down I-80, clearly out testing. Andreas, on the other hand, hasn't seen one on the road yet. The only Semi he's ever seen in person was back in 2018, parked at a Tesla service center in Littleton, Colorado. And honestly, that tracks with how rare these trucks still are. They've been around for years, but only in tiny numbers. I've also had the chance to ride in a Tesla Semi at the ACT Expo a while back, and that experience stuck with me. Even in its early form, it was incredibly smooth, quiet, powerful, in a way that feels almost surreal for a heavy-duty truck. There are videos of those rides already floating around on YouTube, and even through a screen you can tell it's something special. So far, the Semis we've seen have mostly been part of Tesla's internal fleet or placed with select partners for pilot programs. Companies like Pepsi received a small number of trucks, and there were a few others involved in similar trials. What's interesting is that Tesla has never publicly disclosed the exact nature of these agreements. We don't really know if those companies purchased the trucks outright, leased them, rented them, or were simply given access to them for testing purposes. What we do know is that real large-scale customer orders haven't been fulfilled yet. From everything we can tell, these were essentially test units. Pepsi had a handful, and there were a couple of other notable names involved, but it wasn't true mass production. Beyond the big names, there were also smaller fleets that seemed to have 2, 3, or maybe 4 trucks at a time. Altogether, a reasonable estimate would be that somewhere between 100 and 200 Tesla Semis have been built and used for testing and validation so far. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with Dan Priestley, who runs the Tesla Semi program. He explained that what we were seeing back then wasn't really the final product. It wasn't just a prototype, but it also wasn't what customers would ultimately buy. That earlier version was more like an early production phase designed to prove out the technology. Tesla's plan was always to take what they learned from those trucks and then significantly redesign and optimize the vehicle before scaling it for customers. In a way, you can think of it as a Series A and Series B approach. The first wave existed to validate the concept in the real world. The next wave is about efficiency, cost reduction, and manufacturability. That's where things get really interesting. The earlier Semi used a powertrain derived from Tesla's Plaid setup, complete with a clutch disconnect and other complex components. It worked, but it wasn't necessarily optimized for long-term production or maximum efficiency in a commercial context. With this new platform, Tesla has an opportunity to refine everything. If they can squeeze out even more efficiency, they can reduce the size of the battery pack, which is a huge deal. Batteries are one of the biggest cost drivers in electric vehicles, especially in something as large as a Class 8 truck. Now here's where things get a bit confusing, and honestly kind of classic Tesla. The updated Semi website shows a lot of details, but most of the images still feature the older Semi design. The new design, which we've seen teased elsewhere, looks more like the refreshed Model Y front end. It's sleeker and more modern, but it's not what's shown front end. Center on the site. If you go back to Sawyer's tweet, you can see the newer design clearly. That's presumably what the production Semi will look like. But then you open Tesla's official site, and suddenly you're looking at images of the older version. It's strange. Tesla is usually very deliberate with its visuals, especially when rolling out updated product pages. When we pulled up the images side by side, it sparked a debate. Which design is better? Surprisingly, I found myself preferring the older look. In fact, I like it so much that I have a model of the original. Tesla Semi design displayed prominently in the out-of-spec office. It's literally the first thing you see when you walk in. The lighting, the shape, the presence of it just looks incredible. The new design is undeniably futuristic. But it also feels more familiar, almost like a scaled-up Model Y. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but the original Semi had this bold, almost sci-fi look that really set it apart. At this point, we honestly don't know which version will ultimately be the one customers receive, or if Tesla might offer multiple configurations down the line. One explanation for the mixed imagery could be that Tesla simply doesn't have a lot of finalized production units yet to photograph. That wouldn't be too surprising. Still, it's odd to see a major website update without a full set of fresh, consistent visuals. When you dig deeper into Tesla's media gallery, you can find both versions. There are a few images of the newer design, but the majority still feature the older Semi, and honestly, those photos are stunning. The composition, the lighting, the sense of scale all makes the truck look absolutely epic. Whoever shot those images knew exactly what they were doing. Moving into the specifications, Tesla leads with some headline numbers, as they always do. One of the biggest is charging capability, up to 1.2 megawatts. That's an enormous amount of power, and it's made possible through Tesla's use of the Megawatt charging system, or MCs. This will work with Tesla's upcoming V4 superchargers, as well as other MCS-compatible chargers. That said, peak charging power only tells part of the story. What really matters is the charging curve, how long the truck can sustain high power levels, and how quickly it can add meaningful range under real-world conditions. Tesla hasn't shared full details on that yet, but given their track record with charging optimization, expectations are understandably high, and this is really where the Tesla Semi starts to stand out again. It's not just about the truck itself, it's about the ecosystem. Tesla controls the vehicle, the software, the batteries, and the charging infrastructure. For fleet operators, that kind of integration could be incredibly valuable, simplifying operations and reducing downtime. At the end of the day, the Tesla Semi feels like it's finally on the cusp of becoming real in a way it hasn't been before. For years, it's been this almost mythical vehicle announced early, spotted occasionally, talked about endlessly, but rarely seen in action. Now, with website updates, finalized trims, and customer deliveries on the horizon, it feels like we're entering a new phase. There are still plenty of questions. Which design will make it to production? How efficient will it really be? How competitive will the pricing look once everything is finalized? And how quickly can Tesla scale?